So today we're going to be talking about the Super NT. I don't think I need to make a very long video on this. There's a lot of the similarities between it and the NT Mini Noir. They use very similar menu system and stuff like this. There's just some slight differences, and we'll just go over that real quick, but let's see what's in the box real quick. Alright, real quick, I just want to thank Kagato for hooking me up with this. He gave me a pretty good price. He was getting rid of his, and these are still relatively expensive if you try to go through eBay or something like that, so dude, thank you very much. This thing here is normally like around $189, I believe is the price, but if you try to get on eBay now, it's around $400. Now, you can get lucky and find these on every once in a while. They'll drop into the store. There's a few colors they discontinued, but for the most part, if you're just looking for the Famicom color, I think they're still doing the Noir or black color. They just released it. They might have just stopped doing that. And then the one I have is the color of the Super Nintendo. So let's open it up and see what we have in here. And there it is right there. That's how it comes in. It's not as fancy as the Super or the NT Mini Noir, but that's also a much more expensive console. This is like literally at half the price, actually a little under than that. There is some soft cell foam on the top, but it just comes in like a little plastic container inside, like a little plastic crate. And this is it. You can see right here. Just since the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo here and over in Europe all use the same connection or cartridge port, it only needs one. This is what I'm talking about right here. So here we have a US cart, the Donkey Kong Country, and we have Super Metroid here, which is the Japanese Famicom cart. Now, one of the differences you'll see here, let alone that the US ones have dust covers, there's these little parts here, and these are where the little plastic tabs would fit in. So you could theoretically just break those off and put Famicom carts in, and they would work just fine. That's the only region locking the system had. So since the system doesn't have that, there's no problem. You can put these in here. And the reason you might want to do something like that on these systems is in the case of Super Metroid, right now, a loose cart of this in the US is going for about $70. And the price is fluctuating recently because of COVID and everything. So it can go up, it can go down. The Japanese version is roughly around $30, $35. It's much, much cheaper. It is a little bit harder, but you can go on eBay and get these for like same or similar prices. And honestly, I think the front cover art is just a little bit cooler, I think. And the other thing is about this has both the English and the Japanese text on it. So it's literally the same game on whether it's on the Japanese cart or the US. You're not going to always run into that. I got another cart of Final Fight because it was like $10 for the Japanese version. But it's really just like the little story bits and stuff that are in Japanese. Everything else is in English on that. And you'll find out a lot with like a lot of Japanese games. So the system uses the same Cyclone 5 as the NT Mini Noir. Does the same effects, does scanline, does scaling the same. So it only scales up to like 1080. So it's like 4 times scaling, I believe. Still looks really good on my 4K though, really nice and sharp, and you can like scale the image to like 4 times, 4.5 times, all the same stuff you could do on the NT. So we're not going to cover a whole lot of that. We'll just show some of the differences in the menu. So that's really the reason I like not having region locking on these things. It's just because it makes it, simple. You don't have to sit there with like some kind of pliers and break it off, but also for the fact that for obvious reasons, there's certain games like the Firemen that didn't come out here, or like Tetris Gaiden, which is a really cool Tetris versus game if you've ever played it. But then you have some stuff like this where it's just cheaper to get the Japanese version over the American version. So it's a win-win either way. Okay, walk around with the console is going to be really, really simple here. So the only difference on these is, like I said, color scheme. Like this one stays a certain color. It is still kind of modeled after the European Japanese version of the console, but just has a color scheme. But like the European one, you're going to see like this area like gray. This one's still like that white, and then these are going to be like a gray color and stuff. So to give you an idea. So quick walk around. Only 2 controller ports this time, so there's no multi-tap built in. You can still use like Super Nintendo multi-taps and stuff on this, and it'll work just fine. So this also has the SD card slot in it. And just like on the NT Mini Noir, you can jailbreak it. You can play Super Nintendo ROMs off of it as long as they don't have expansion chips in them. So for instance, something like Star Fox with the Super FX chip, or something like Mario Kart that uses a little chip that's inside the cart to help co-process some of the stuff going on the Super Nintendo. those aren't going to work. But anything that doesn't have a chip, it just runs native off the internals of the Super Nintendo, like F-Zero, stuff like that. It's going to work just fine, and that's most Super Nintendo games, to be honest with you. So if you're like kind of crying over the price of Chrono Trigger in the US, and you don't know how to read Japanese to get the Japanese version of it, don't fret. In the meantime, you can load it on an SD card and play it that way. Alright, so on the back here we do have an HDMI out, which supports up to 1080. The HDMI also does a little extra thing as well. Power is on micro USB. I'm not thrilled. I'd rather have a barrel connector with that. I don't know why they went that route. Is it really that much cheaper than using a barrel connector? I can't imagine it really is. But they went this route, and hopefully it stays a-okay for quite a long time. I have bad luck with these things breaking on me. The entire bottom of the console is just a flat rubber mat, and this is very, very sticky. Once it's laying on whatever it is, it's there. And this thing also has a weight in it, so it feels a little bit weightier than it actually is. But that's it. It's not very complicated. So you can order a controller with the console. It doesn't always necessarily come with one. This one, I think this first run did. One of the things that they actually, it's like comes in a separate box. It isn't in the console like with the NT Mini Noir. But this is it right here. This is their 8-bito, of course. This one in particular is Bluetooth and not 2.4G, which I don't like. This particular controller, so they give you this dongle here. And the difference between the 2.4 gig dongles and these ones are a little sync button, little firmware update there, which it does do some cool things. But you can see the difference between the two dongles here. There's no sync button, no USB. This is very much just plug and play and just go. That's all this is. There's no firmware update or anything. And you get a dongle for every controller, where this is kind of like a sold separate thing, and then you get the controllers on top of that. But the controller does a pretty good job. It does have that sort of look. It does feel very much like a Super Nintendo controller while you're using it. There is a US and a European version, so you can get like all the flat color buttons instead of the concave and convex buttons. The D-pad feels pretty spot on to me. But the cool thing with it being Bluetooth is, as long as you have the latest firmware updated to the dongle itself, you can get some of these, which is the official Nintendo re-release of the Nintendo Switch Bluetooth SNES controllers. I don't know why it was so hard to say. But you can sync these to it, and it works great. So this is the SN30 Pro. As you can see, it's got analog sticks and stuff. So this thing right here is basically designed to work with your Nintendo Switch. It's got analog sticks. There's actually motion on this. Charges through USB-C on the top. It's got some triggers on the bottom besides the L and R triggers. And a little bit of vibration. You can actually use this on your Nintendo Switch, on your computer, or whatever. You can also use it on the Super NT, or on the 8-bito Bluetooth dongle, I should say. And so if you're using this on the Super NT, it does have a home button, and when you press that, it's mostly for the Nintendo Switch, but when you press it on this thing, it'll bring up the menu. So that's booted up. Let's see the menu. Let's talk about some of the differences real quick, and then let's wrap up. Alright guys, so let's take a quick look at the menu. As you can see, it's very similar to the NT Mini Noir. We'll take a quick look at resolutions. We have all the same stuff we did before. We can render out at 480 or all the way up to 1060p, or 1080p I should say. And we also have the European standards there too, but as far as I understand, in Europe they also do 60 now. Then we have screen size, which is just your cropping factor. So I typically leave it at 4:3, 16:9. And then you have your height, but this is really only if you're at 1080. If you're at 720, the height goes away. It kind of scales on its, or it has like a set scale since it's like an even scale. Then we have the different scalers. Really, there's not a whole bunch here that I touch because it's not something I use. Scan lines I use quite a bit, especially in 720p mode. With the softer look of 720p in the scan lines, I find that it helps. So advanced mode unlocks now width and height, so now you can get like very granular with like how it's scaling the image and everything if you like. Some people that get really nitty gritty in this will do that and actually even disable some of the interpolation. If you have some games that like draw some junk that were normally in the scan line, you can crop that in. And as you can see here, there's nothing that they really changed for the scalers option. Alright, so let's go ahead and move down to extra features here. And as you'll see, there's 64 sprite tiles. As far as I understand, what this does is it helps eliminate flicker on some few games on the Super Nintendo have flicker. Mode 5 and 6 interlace disable. I'm not really sure what that is. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what a lot of this stuff is. High-res blending. So some games apparently use a combination of high-res mode and low-res mode to make transparencies like water. Kirby's Dream Land 3 does this. However, on a normal HD TV, it just kind of looks weird. Here is where you can control the frame buffer. So we have fully buffered, zero delay, which means it's going out as fast as it can. It just basically kind of downclocks the Super Nintendo a little bit so you don't get screen tearing. And here we have, this is basically gamma control for red, green, and blue. Since I had scan lines on earlier, I turned it up a little bit, turning it back down. Alright, this piece here, the analog cells, is called their digital analog converter. So if you notice, there's not a analog output on the back of the Super NT since it's a little bit cheaper price system. So if you want to still hook this up to a CRT, PVM, something like that, you do have to purchase this little extra thing. So what it does is it puts like a specialized digital signal out that's much faster, but runs at the native speed of the console. So normally if you're going through HDMI out, the system downclocks itself just ever so tad to match that 60 hertz because the original runtime of the Super Nintendo was just a little bit faster than 60 hertz. So you would get this like little screen tearing on digital displays that you didn't get on the analog displays. So if you do this, it runs it at the normal speed, and then you get your analog outputs for whatever you need, like light gun games or anything like that. It is an extra purchase compared to the Super NT, but from what I hear, it's a pretty good alternative and something I'll probably be picking up later in the future when they become more available. Alright, so the Super NT does not come with a controller like the NT Mini does, and it doesn't have some like little extra kind of like side perks that like if you jailbreak it, you don't get a whole bunch of extra cores. But they did pack in 2 games with this one. So you get Super Turrican Director's Cut, and then Super Turrican 2, which is not that common, came out like in 95, so it's a little bit harder to find. Super Turrican Director's Cut, the story behind this is, the game was actually originally developed to be a 6 megabit game, quite a large game for back in the day. And the company publishing it, the company that normally covers the cost of like cartridge production and all that stuff, didn't want to pay for the larger cart. So what they did is they actually cut a few levels out and put it on a smaller cartridge. So they finally have restored the game in its entirety, and you get to play it for the first time with all the levels cut on the Super NT. Might have come out on emulation, you know, like that ROM might have been released at some time, I don't know. But it is cool that it's an official release from Factor 5. And yeah, you get to play it for the first time. As you can see, it kind of plays like Contra or something to that effect. From what I've tried so far, it's actually a really fun game. I've never played it, I've never rented it back in the day, but that's part of the cool thing about having old consoles like this is discovery of stuff, and it's pretty cool. There's something that is not very common to me or that I'm aware of on the system already. Okay, so here we have Super Turrican 2, and I am not aware of this one at all. Apparently came out in 95, and it's actually pretty expensive to find. So even though they didn't do anything special with this, there's nothing lost to it or whatever, it's still really cool to have this due to its rarity. And I gotta tell you, like, I know Super Turrican 1, Super Turrican 2, just from hearing other people talk about it, they're quite a bit different from each other. Like this one you can turn into like a ball like Samus and Metroid and drop bombs and stuff. It's kind of weird. But I gotta tell you, like from what I played so far, like Super Turrican 1 and 2, I know there's people who prefer 1. I actually like this one quite a bit more. I think this, from what I played so far, this is actually really cool. I've been real impressed with some of the effects, some of the level design in this thing. Some of the weapon upgrades and stuff that you get are just really flippin' cool. There's this really kick-ass laser. It's got a really cool like transparency effect that it does. I just love the way this thing looks. I just pick it up here in a second and just start wreaking havoc with it. It's pretty damn cool. Oh, look what I found. It's a freaking vehicle. And this is cool. Like the little pickups kind of like give away where you need to jump the vehicle and everything, but just look at all that hellfire coming out of the thing. It's cool as hell. And then what I've played so far, like the boss battles have been pretty creative. And here's one of the boss battles. It's a face wall. I mean, it's weird, but it was kind of a cool battle because I had this weapon that kind of like when it would bounce, if it would like bounce off of whatever it could or whatever. And as you can see, if I'm firing at the bottom, it kind of bounces its way to the top. So once you get the hang of it and the patterns and stuff, it's pretty easy to defeat some of these guys. But it's gonna get much harder later on, so I can't like give you like a full review. I just think that this is actually a pretty cool and creative pack, and I actually really prefer the speed of Super Turrican 2 over 1. 1 feels like it's just a little bit slower and more of an exploratory kind of game than 2 is. Alright, thanks to the work of Smoke Monster, you can go to his GitHub and you can actually get a firmware for this that's going to jailbreak the device. Now, there's not extra cores like Game Boy cores or anything like that. It's just a Super Nintendo, essentially. However, you can load SNES ROMs onto an SD card and run them in most cases. And that's great for games like this that are stupid expensive. Like Castlevania Dracula X on the Super Nintendo right now is going for $300 just for the loose cart with no manual, no nothing. There just weren't very many copies of this going around. And then you have stuff out there, it's like kind of like on the expensive side, but not quite. Like Chrono Trigger is normally like around $100. It's not unobtainium, but it's still not cheap, and you might want to play that like day one. I'm not going to get into the legalities of this stuff. I'm going to tell you that I try to buy all the carts that I can, but I completely understand that something like this is not obtainable for me, and so that's why I play it off of an SD card. Also, I actually owned this cart at one point in my life, and I have no clue where the hell it went. So, as far as I'm concerned, I owned it at one point. It's okay. Now, here what I'm going to show is that certain games that have special chips in them, like Super Mario RPG, are just not going to run because you need those expansion chips to run on the system, and the Cyclone 5 is just not powerful enough to power all those chips. So they run something like Star Fox or something to that extent. You need to have the actual physical cartridge for it to work. Alright, I think this is really only going to pop on YouTube at like a higher bit or a higher like resolution, like 4K. But as you can see, like the 3D effects in Star Fox, they were always like really low resolution. You got really jaggy lines and stuff. And like pre-rendered stuff like Donkey Kong tends to look pretty messy. So when you switch on scan lines and go to like a lower resolution like 720, that like general blurriness tends to help it out quite a bit, I think. That's what I would suggest for those particular games if you want to look best on here. Other than that, stuff like you'll see in the title screen here, like 2D pixel effects, come off pretty damn sharp. So you don't need to worry about switching it on for that. So hey guys, what'd you think? That's the Super NT. I'm really thrilled with the device. I'm having the best time ever. Like lately, I've been playing Batman Returns, completely out of left field. Never played it before. It's made by Konami. Came out when the movie came out. Now usually movie tie-ins kind of suck, but some of the Batman games around 89 to like 95 were like actually fairly good. Like the animated series game was pretty good too. And it's just been super fun sitting there like clobbering these guys. Basically he just picks them up full arm, like one armed, and just slams them on their head on the ground. It's just like, those guys are landing concussed. So just finding like little gems like that here and there, and I'm able to find like a little bit more stuff by using the jailbroken stuff and looking at ROMs and games and stuff like Jackie Crush, which is like a pinball game that I never heard of, which is apparently the sequel to Alien Crush and Devil's Crush. So that's really cool too. So I'm having a blast. It's awesome. So let me know what you guys think. Is this something you'd be interested in? Are you maybe like a little bit too young? You didn't grow up with this system, so you don't really have the same kind of attachment with it. Let me know in the comments down below. Give me some engagement. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Doesn't matter, you're related to me. And I will see you in the next video. Later, guys.